Now we're going to talk about trimming the cylinder. So this is the cylinder that we threw. We put it onto a bat. We dried it and let it stiffen up on top. Then we pulled it off the bat and let it dry a little bit upside down. Right now the entire piece is leather hard, or as hard as leather. So we bring our leather hard pot to the potter's wheel so that when we're ready to trim it. We're also going to need our wooden knife, our needle tool, a little bit of stiff or new clay, the small trimming tool, the large trimming tool, a metal cap, and I have a little bit of water with a sponge to finish it up. I'm going to check to see how thick the base feels, how thick the walls are, how vertical they are, so that I know what I need to trim off. I'm only going to be trimming along the bottom and a little bit up the wall, but just a very little bit. Once I've checked all that out, the next thing I need to do is tap center. In order to tap center, you have to try to place your pot upside down on the wheel head as close to center as possible, making it a little easier. We're going to turn our wheel on very slowly so the pot does not fall off. I'm going to use my non-dominant hand on its side, so in this case the left hand on the left side, to feel how far off center it is. And I'm going to use my dominant hand on my dominant side, in this case my right, to tap it. So I feel where the bump is, and when it gets to this side, I tap it. It's very important to tap it low, but in control, not too hard. This is very tricky. Keep in mind too that your cylinder is handmade. It will not be perfectly on center, so you just want to make sure that you get it as close to being on center as possible. The next thing you need to do is make sure that it is attached to the wheel head. So you want to use 4 pieces of clay and put them around your pot, equal and opposite, so you do not shift the pot off center. Your clay should not stick to the pot. Make sure you put it on both sides of the pot and press down equal and opposite. You don't want to press into the pot, crushing it. You just want to put the clay up against the pot and press the clay down into the wheel head. And then once you've secured your pot, you always want to make sure to check that it is still on center. The next thing that we're going to actually begin trimming the pot. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to trim the horizontal. This is this flat surface right here, or the base of it. The horizontal, when we trim it, we have 2 objectives. We want to make sure that we flatten it out, or made it smooth, and that we've trimmed any thickness off. I don't have a lot of thickness here, so my main objective is to trim the pot. As a right-handed person, I will use the trimming tool in my right hand, supported by my left hand, and I will work from the right side of the pot in towards the center. When you trim, if you are getting ribbons of clay coming off, then you have the right, then your pot is leather hard. It's the right consistency. If your clay is sticking to the pot, to the tool, then your clay is too wet. You should set it aside and trim it later. If you get shavings and dust, then your pot has dried out too much. You can try to spray your pot with water and keep it wrapped for another day, or you've dried it out too much and you'll have to get rid of it. The base is now flat, and I didn't have to take any thickness out, so I'm done trimming the horizontal. The next step to trimming your cylinder is to trim the outside, or the vertical. You want this wall to be vertical all the way through the bottom. There's still a little extra clay here, so that's what we're trying to take off. We're going to press the trimming tool against the outside edge in order to not pop it out of our clay that's securing it. We're going to use this cap. The cap needs to be metal. The metal will stick to the moist pot, and if our fingers are dry, especially if they have a little clay on them, they will slide. So I can press down without having any pull or friction against my fingers. Again, my hands support each other, and I trim the outside to be vertical. If you trim too far, you can gouge the pot. So it's very important that you just trim until it's vertical with the rest of your wall. Again, I'm looking for ribbons of clay coming off, nothing too sticky, and nothing too dry. You want this to blend in with the wall of your cylinder. Now that the outside is nice and vertical, I'm done trimming the vertical. The next step is to trim the dip. It's important to trim from about 1/4 or 1/2 inch from the edge in towards the center, so that this part is a little bit below, in this case, because it's upside down, the edge, below the edge. The edge is where we want the pot to sit, so we want a little bit of area here that's not going to be sitting on the table. In this case, I'm going to use a small trimming tool. I'm going to come in about 1/4 to 1/2 inch from the edge, and again I'm still trimming from the right side into the middle. And I just want to trim a little bit extra, and that's what I call the dip. This is going to keep your pot nice and stable on the table when it's sitting. When you feel like you've probably removed enough to make it a little bit deeper, you can use the flat edge of your wooden knife to check. You want to make sure that you can see light throughout the entire dip. If you can see light throughout the entire dip and it's sitting on the edges, then you've achieved what you want. This part is where it will sit on the table, and this part will not touch the table. The final step for trimming a cylinder is to trim a bevel. That's just cutting off the corner between the base and the wall. This will give the pot a little bit of a nice lift on the edge, and it will give your glaze a stopping point so it will not stick to the kiln shelf in the firing process. This is a very brief and quick move. You just want to cut that corner off. You don't want it rounded, you just want it an angle cut. Now you have a bevel, and it's nice and clean. It's going to give you a little separation. Once you feel your pot is completely done, then you want to take it off of the wheel head, and you want to check it. If at this point you feel like anything is too thick, then you would put it back onto the wheel head by re-tap centering it, placing the clay around it, and making sure it's stuck to the wheel head. Then you can continue trimming it. If you are done, then you want to take a damp sponge, preferably organic, wipe the areas that you've trimmed so that they blend in with the rest of your pot. Try not to damage your bevel or any other areas that you've worked on. Lastly, inside the dip, you will use a pencil to sign your name. And then your cylinder is complete.